All right, today we are going to be learning how to multiply integers with chips to model. So I'm going to do a couple of examples and show you up in my top box, my dance floor as we learned in adding and subtracting. So I've got that we are beginning with two groups. So I'm going to pull over these giant circles that are going to be my groups. And it says to put 3 positive counters in each group. So that keyword each tells us that we are actually going to be multiplying these integers. So when I'm writing out my number sentence, I'm going to use that first, my groups is going to be my first integer. I had 2 groups, so I'm going to put 2. And then I'm going to be multiplying because I had 2 of those groups. And in each group, I had 3 positives. So I'm going to put a positive 3 for that second integer. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of what I am writing in my left-hand box. I'm just drawing what I had put up top. I've got my 2 groups, and I'm going to put 3 yellow circles. Remember, our yellow chips are positives, so I've got 2 groups of 3 positives. In my next box, I'm actually going to be putting them all together. So I'm going to put the 3 from the first group and the 3 from the second group. And that means that I've got a total of 6 positive chips in my box. So 2 times 3 is 6, which we already know, but now we know how to do it with chips. All right, my next example, it says that I'm going to be beginning with 3 groups and putting 1 negative counter in each group. So I'm pulling over my 3 groups here, and in each one, I'm going to put 1 negative. So I got to fill up all 3 groups with that. So my number sentence, remember my first number is my group, so I'm going to put a positive 3. I'm going to be multiplying, because again it says each group, and then I've got a negative 1, and I can use parentheses to make that a little bit more clear. Remember that second number can get parentheses around it to help us read it. I'm going to make a copy of my pictures here. I'm going to write out my 3 groups. And in each group, I'm going to draw 1 negative chip. And now I'm going to draw it all together. So they were in groups. I'm going to draw them all together here. 3 negative chips. So that means that 3 times that negative 1, I've got a negative 3 left over. 3 red chips is a negative 3. Let's try another example. This one's a little bit different because I'm going to be doing a negative times a positive. Now in our last one, our first number told us our groups. We can't have negative groups, so instead we're going to use the commutative property of multiplication to change the problem. Remember, commutative, it starts with that CO. CO stands for change order. So I'm going to change the order of those integers. So instead of negative 2 times 4, I'm going to rewrite it with that property as 4 times negative 2. Again, I'm going to put it in those parentheses to make it a little bit more clear. Now I have a positive number for those groups, so I'm in the clear. I'm going to pull over 4 groups. And then in each group, I am going to be putting a negative 2. So let me just pull that on over. 1 more. And then I'm going to put 2 red chips in each one of those group circles. So I've got to fill up every single group with 2 negative chips. Negative 2. All right, let's go ahead and write it down in our notes. So I'm going to draw out those 4 groups. My box is a little bit small, but we'll make it do. And I'm going to put 2 red chips in every single circle. So I'm going to use my red colored pencil there. All right, let's put them all together. So they arrived in groups, and now I'm just putting them in that second box. And it looks like all together I have 8 red chips, so that's going to be a negative 8. All right, let's try another one. We're going to switch it up even more. So in this example, I've got a negative times a negative. Now, before, we were able to just switch those orders, switch the order using the commutative property, and that doesn't do us any good this time. So we can't have negative groups, and the properties don't help us. So instead, we're going to pull out the negative, and we are going to use it as an opposite. Remember, we talked about how opposite of integers, we can use that negative sign to mean the same thing. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take out the negative in my number sentence rewrite, and I'm going to use giant parentheses for the whole problem and put it right the same way inside those parentheses. And now it's almost like I'm just going to do the problem and ignore that opposite for right now. We'll come back to it, but on my big square right there, I'm going to be solving 3 groups of -3 now. So I'm putting in my 3 groups, and then in each circle, I'm going to put 3 negative chips. Now to show this in our drawing, I'm actually going to take my pencil, and I'm going to draw giant parentheses around that whole box. And I'm going to put a little opposite sign out front. I know my writing's running into each other, but I've got that opposite pulled out outside of the problem. Now I'm going to draw my 3 groups. And in each group, I've got 3 negative chips, so 3 red chips. And now I'm going to put it all together. Again, I'm going to draw those giant parentheses with the opposite sign on the outside. I'm going to come back to that. And it looks like since I have 3 groups of -3, I'm just going to draw them without those grouping circles. And so I have a -9. So in my solution, I'm going to go ahead and write this. I've got the opposite. In my parentheses, I found that I had -9 in there. But I know that the opposite of -9 is actually going to be a +9. So that means that my final answer, -3 times -3, comes out to be a +9. All right, in our next video, we'll be learning about dividing integers with chips. Stay tuned.